I would now like to talk about the Coverage Summary tab. The first thing to note is that the coverage types are populated with all the possible coverage types associated with your particular carrier. I would also like to note that there are 3 color-coded columns. They represent 3 different buckets of payments. So with regards to this claim, this column is what you would owe National Vendor on items after line item limits are applied. The red column is what you would owe the insured as an ACV amount. The yellow column is what you owe the insured later, or the recoverable amount. And again, these 3 buckets are after line item limits applied. You will see that because this column, line item limits, is empty, there are no stated line item limits on either of these coverage types. So let's change that and see what happens to this page. We go to the coverage page. Now we'll put in a $5,000 line item limit for jewelry. You will see that now this is populated with $5,000. Your amount was reduced drastically from over $10,000 to now $5,000 because a line item limit was hit. You can see that back on the detailed inventory. Coverage type jewelry. You'll see a $10,128.75 RCV total with sales tax, which runs up against a line item limit of $5,000, creating a $5,128.75 overage and a post line item limit ACV amount of $5,000. No recoverable amount. So here are the totals of these 3 payment buckets after limits are applied. These amounts are now compared and run up against an aggregate limit. Since there are none populated, you will see these blank, and therefore these amounts just carry over. So these 3 buckets represent the same thing: what you owe National Vendor, what you owe the insured now, and what you owe the insured later, the recoverable amount, after the aggregate limits are applied. So when we add these 2, we get a total of $916.41. So I will go to the Coverage tab, and I will put an aggregate limit on contents of $500, and we will see how that looks on the coverage summary. So you will see, because there is no line item limit for contents, that those amounts are represented here: what you owe the insured now and what you owe the insured later. Because none of these items are toggled to yes for replacement, there is nothing owed to National Vendor. Now this amount again of $916.41 runs up against a $500 aggregate limit. And these are what your 3 payment buckets look like now. It takes from the recoverable amount first, then from the ACV amount. Lastly, it will take from the owed to National Vendor amount. Again, none is toggled to yes for replacement, so that's unaffected. But you will see that after the aggregate limits are applied to this $916.41 total, you now have a remaining amount of just that aggregate limit of $500. When I scroll down, these are the totals I see. So there is nothing owed to National Vendor, and there is $5,500 owed to the insured now, and nothing in recoverable. And these are the overages of the aggregate limits being applied. Now, after line item limits are considered and aggregate limits are considered, this worksheet will then consider the policy limit. The policy limit on this claim is $150,000, you can see here, and that's populated on the coverage tab right here. So on the coverage summary, you will see that the $5,500 is all subject to the policy limit. That is determined here. You will see that this is not exempt from the policy limit, neither is this. Therefore, the entire $5,500 is run up against a policy limit of $150,000. Therefore, that amount is unaffected, and your total will be $5,500. You don't owe National Vendor anything, and you owe the insured $5,500 now with zero recoverable. How is that reflected on the Payouts tab? The content summary up above shows that there's two items on this claim. There's a total RCV of $10,086.90. Sales tax was toggled yes on the detailed inventory, so you will see sales tax here of $958.26. You will see a less depreciation amount of $137.46, or a total depreciation amount. Your total line item limit overage was $5,128.75, and your aggregate limit overage was $416.45. Total of all overages was $5,545.16. Again, here's your three payment buckets broken down. National Vendor is owed nothing because nothing was toggled to yes. The cash payout to the insured is spelled out in detail here, with the deductible finally being taken on this line, for a total payout to the insured of $5,250. And again, you'll see nothing in recoverable exposure. Now let's look at this. The $250 deductible taken out of the ACV payment, or the cash payout to the insured, is reflected here. But there are plenty of overages to apply that deductible to, which some carriers choose to do. So back to the coverage page, and this is what determines how that is applied. So let's take the primary method of deductible application and change that to overages. The secondary application will be cash payout, and let's see how that looks on this Payouts tab. You will now see a sentence of instruction letting you know that the deductible of $250 will be applied to total overages of $55.45.16. Therefore, when you scroll down to the bucket of the insured payout breakdown, you will not see that deductible taken there anymore. Now let's look at a couple more scenarios. I'll go back to the coverage tab. I will eliminate the aggregate limit overages and the line item limit overages. And you will see that reflected on the coverage summary. Because there are no line item limit overages, these amounts on the detailed inventory just transfer to this page, and you'll see the three buckets. Those will run up against aggregate limits, of which there are none, so the amounts just transfer over. When you scroll down, you will see that those amounts are then run up against the policy limit, which again is $150,000, so it doesn't come into play. This creates a payment of $10,907.69 to the insured now, and $137.46 in recoverable. Let's look at the Payouts tab and see what that looks like. Again, nothing to National Vendor. And you will see that the deductible is taken from the cash payout to the insured. And that is because on the coverage tab, there were not enough overages to cover the deductible, as we know there are none, because there are no limits, and the remaining deductible to be applied to the secondary option below, which was cash payout. And that is why on the Payouts tab, you see the deductible applied to the cash payout. Now let's insert a policy limit that will affect these payouts. So back to the coverage page. Let's put in an $8,000 policy limit and see what that does on the coverage summary. So after line item limits are applied, you see nothing to National Vendor. You see a payment to the insured of $10,907.96 and a recoverable amount of $137.46. Runs up against the aggregate limits, of which there are none, so those amounts just transfer over, creating no aggregate overages either. Now these amounts must now run up against a policy limit of $8,000. You see that reflected over here now. And this is what it looks like. It wipes out this $137.46, takes the remainder from what is owed to the insured now, creating an overage of $2,907.69 and a payout to the insured now of $8,000. How does that look on the Payouts tab? Again, nothing owed to national vendor. You will see that the deductible of $250 to be applied to total overages of $3,045.16. We do now have overages because they're policy overages, as you can see here. So we do not see the deductible taken here because we chose on the Coverage tab for the primary method of taking the deductible would be from the overages. Let's look at another scenario. Back to the coverage summary, we see that these are not exempt from the policy limit. Let's make this item exempt. Back to the Coverage tab, to the Jewelry coverage type, toggle that to yes. Now back to the coverage summary. You will see that this amount of $10,907.69 and this amount of $137.46 in the what you owe insured now bucket and the what you owe insured later bucket, or the recoverable amount, runs up against a policy limit of $8,000. But the amount subject to the policy limit, you will notice, is not this $10,907.69 amount. It is only a $778.94 amount. And that is because this $10,128.75 is exempt from the policy limit. It is marked yes. So that gets taken out when this is run up against a policy limit. And you will see that there is no policy overages. That is because the $8,000 policy limit is well over the $916.41 amount that is subject to the policy limits. So after we see that there are no overages, this amount that was exempt is added back in, creating payouts to the insured, nothing to national vendor, $10,907.69 to the insured now, and a recoverable amount of $137.46, which should be reflected on the Payouts tab. $10,657.69 is the amount you owe the insured now, which is $250 less because the deductible needs to be taken from our secondary option, because there are no overages, which you can read here. Not enough overage to cover the deductible, so the remaining deductible to be applied to the secondary option of cash payout. And the $137.46 is still your recoverable, which is reflected there as well. I know we covered a lot, and again, your national vendor rep is fully trained on this quote sheet, so we'll be able to walk you through any questions that you might have. Thank you.